What an honor to have Tony and Dr. Nazarian here to be our celebrity influencers. Quite a crowd. You all know that social media has had a huge influence over the past 3 to 5 years in plastic surgery. We all are aware of that. We thought we'd try and put some data to it, just to make it a bit more scientific, to add something to the literature to show what kind of influence and what's going on, and to see if we can tease out some other information. And we found out some interesting things. So next slide. So in the background, we all know that social media is getting into all professions, and particularly in plastic surgery. 80% of the United States adults or people, I guess adults, are on at least one social media, and 98% of millennials. You can read this for yourself. I'll read it a little bit. 62% of ASPS members have an account. Many of the integrated plastic surgery programs are now developing accounts. And we all know that breast augmentation is, if not the most, one of the most commonly performed aesthetic procedures. And the average age for a breast augmentation falls within the millennial group. Just to rehash, boomers, and these numbers are a year one way or the other, but averages age 54 to 72. Gen X is 38 to 53. Millennials are 22 to 37-ish. And post-millennials, or Gen Z, are less than that, less than 22 or 23 or 21, depending upon who you talk to. Next slide. So we looked at 2.5 years of breast augmentations in my practice, single surgeon. It was 180 breast augmentations. We then solicited them via a phone interview with a number of questions to find out more about them, their demographics, their education, their income. Some were, of course, a little bit hesitant about responding, but we had a very good response. We had 165 people respond, which is almost 70% responded to the survey. Next slide. I'm sorry, go back. So this was the distribution of responses. And you'll notice that Gen Z, the younger ones, and the baby boomers were really not represented very well. So the statistics on them is probably not very good, and that's probably a weakness of the paper, but they just didn't respond, and actually didn't represent a large number of my patients for breast augmentation. The most, 64%, were millennials, 27% were Gen X. Next slide. When we asked them who uses social media, again, the Gen Z were not a large number. I think it was about 30 of them approximately. And the boomers really were only 4, and only 2 participated. But as you can see, the millennials and the Gen X use social media extensively. Next slide. We wanted to know, how do our patients use social media? Who does it influence? I think the slide might be out of order, and I apologize. What platform has the most influence? And does it influence their decision to undergo breast augmentation? Next slide. And yeah, this was out of order. So it was a retrospective phone survey. It was 2.5 years long. We asked about demographics, social media, etc. Next slide. 180 patients, 125 participated, 69%. Age range 18 to 61, 97% used social media. Next slide. The types of social media used across the board, not necessarily for breast augmentation. We just asked them, what social media do you use? Across the board, for everyone, 92% utilize Facebook. Surgeon's website is not necessarily social media, of course, but we put it in there, and they said 85% use the surgeon's social media, and that crosses over into, obviously, breast augmentation investigation or research. 74% used Instagram, 43% Snapchat. I was surprised about the amount of usage of Pinterest and Twitter. Next slide. So when we asked them, when researching breast augmentation, how much they use social media, this is where things started to get a bit more interesting. Millennials used it 77% of the time. Gen Z, which didn't have enough people to be statistically significant, only 6%. Gen X said 17%. Now, there was some recall bias. Remember, this study was over a 2.5-year period. It was a retrospective, so now we're about 3 years out. And so we don't know if it was biased, if we influenced them a little bit. We had several different callers, but these were the numbers we got. Next slide. When we asked them what social media in general they used by generation, again, the Gen X had much less Instagram usage than the millennials. And the millennials, remember, are 64%, or about almost 2/3 of my breast augmentations and 1/3 with Gen X. So while on an absolute number, it would look to be correct, this is a percentage. So the millennials use social media overwhelmingly rather than the Gen X in terms of especially Instagram. Next slide. When we ask them specifically, not just which ones you use, but which ones you use for what did you use to research breast augmentation, 58% said Instagram, and this related to the surgeon in particular, overall breast augmentation research. 58% across the board used Instagram, 49% used surgeon's website, and then down the line for Pinterest and Facebook. And of course, we know that Facebook is aimed at a different demographic, and so is Pinterest, and it all validated what we all knew to begin with. Next slide. Our results overall, though, were quite interesting, and that was that patients researched breast augmentation using Instagram overwhelmingly, but they only used the physician's social media 18% to research breast augmentation, at least in my cohort, in my group, my demographic, which was interesting. They're looking out there at big pages, people with a lot of followers, and they come in asking specific questions. Is it a dual plane? Are you under the gland, or are you under the muscle, etc.? And then they only used 18% for my specific social media, and I'm moderately active in social media. I've got about almost 8,000 followers. It's not in the realm of a lot of celebrity physicians these days. So the other interesting thing about all this was that they still went to the website of my site, 85% of the time. So while they're out there searching and looking and researching and utilizing all kinds of different social media, and the millennials overwhelmingly on Instagram, they weren't necessarily going to the surgeon they picked. To me, that implies that they're still staying local for where they'll have their breast augmentation, but they're educating themselves across the board anywhere they can on social media, on popular social media sites. But then they use that as a gateway to then say, okay, who's local? And they still go to the website. Only 2% of our patients posted their surgical results post-operatively. Next slide. The patient's perceived impact of social media and breast augmentation was interesting. When we asked them whether they thought social media was important in deciding where and who and when to get breast augmentation, and which social media or which sites on websites were important, they downgraded certain websites. They thought Instagram wasn't quite as important, and yet they obviously were. Next slide. So that's really it. My takeaways from our study were the following. Websites are still valid, mostly for pictures for before and after. If you go to your Google Analytics, you obviously see that everyone goes to the before and after, the video sites, the picture sites. Specifically, the study was about my practice. So an older surgeon, a boomer, me, should be active on Instagram. It serves as a gateway, and it's an important part of the practice. I still see about 20% of patients that come in for breast augmentation that say, oh, I follow you on Instagram, or I've been following you for a while, and that's how I found out about you. And then, of course, when they start talking, they know people in the neighborhood or the community who know about me. But it was a good gateway, and that the website, as I said, is still important. Millennials got the most of the breast augmentations, and they utilized Instagram the most to find out about breast augmentation. And the locality of it, I think that they're still local. One of the things that we didn't present here on these slides was educational level. They were fairly well educated. About 2/3 were college educated. Didn't ask 1 year, one course, or 2 year or 4 year. And the other thing that I thought was interesting was income. When you talk to marketing people, sometimes they'll say, well, you need to market towards a female and have this much income and this much household. The vast majority of our breast augmentations are using care credit. The vast majority of them are less than 100,000, less than 70,000 per year income. And I think that's an important little tidbit, a little demographic that I didn't present, but that was in our paper. So that was it. We found out Instagram was important. Websites are still vital. People still want to go to the websites to a large extent. And then down the line, a small tidbit also was that Twitter, and I don't know if the numbers are valid, but Twitter is kind of increasing in importance amongst younger people too. I thought it was more of a boomer thing, but it's actually, the numbers are increasing with younger age, which totally caught me by surprise. So that's my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Moliver, for your very in-depth summary of your paper. And I want to just ask the attendees to kind of start thinking about the questions they would have for you or Dr. Youn or Dr. Nazarian, who are very big influencers in the social media realm. And while you're gathering your questions, you can text them into that chat box below. But I would love to get your insight, Dr. Nazarian and Dr. Youn, about the paper, and then kind of just kind of sharing your experience with your practice in social media.
So I can get started real quick. I thought a very well done paper, Clayton. I really appreciate you putting this out there and taking the time to do this research, because as we all know, I mean, websites are still so important, and you have shown how important they are, but really outreach to new patients, social media is such a great way now to do that. But I think one of the issues that a lot of people have is like, where do you focus? Where do you go with it? And one thing that your paper has done a really nice job is showing that if you've got a practice that you're focusing on the Gen X and the millennials, like breast augmentation, then it's going to, suit you to be more on Instagram than spending your time on Facebook. And you mentioned Twitter, obviously. That being said, I think also, and what would be really interesting, which, this is beyond the scope of your paper, is if you've got a more mature practice, if you're doing more facelifts, if you're doing more blepharoplasties, then maybe not going on Instagram and spending your time on Facebook may be a better option. Did you see anything with that where, I know your boomer, the number of boomers are very, very little with yours, but have you seen in your practice anything else when you've talked with your patients about that being the case?
It's funny you should say that. Thinking about presenting tonight, I had two thoughts. All along the past few years, I think we've all thought, well, the demographics of Facebook is certain age set, so we ought to send mommy makeovers over there, and perhaps facelifts and facial aesthetics over there, and the breast dogs to Instagram. And I don't do Snapchat, but I think that's a big player too. So patients, I have heard say that. I had the thought today, but I'm not sure if it's a waste of time. Is 20-something, 30-something-year-olds are influencers on their parents. They're feeding them information, and I wonder if facelift or blepharoplasty or things that we associated with the 50-plus age group might not be vicariously fed to the child of the 55-year-old to say, hey, this is the important parts of a facelift, little video, and that person might tell their parents. I was just thinking about that today.
That's actually, Clayton, that's actually been shown.
What I have heard them come in and say, Facebook, particularly the Facebook mommy groups for mommy makeovers, there's these groups in each little community. I think the facelifts is really word of mouth. I think that's more still a relationship-driven thing.
There's actually a lot of studies now, if you look up Forbes and things like that, that speak to exactly what you said, that the millennials are influencing the boomers a lot, whether it comes to buying a car. They might just say, oh, Mercedes, because that's what everybody has, but their kids will say, no, well, the Cadillac now has these features and you should go for that. They're just so well plugged in and researching on their phones that they do actually influence heavily the boomers. Just actually had a patient today bring in her mom for a facelift consult, and I've been doing fillers, and she's a millennial. But what I think the question I want to ask you, Clayton, is you've taken that step into data analysis of where your patients are coming from, and I feel like so many of our colleagues just don't. They sort of have people fill out, how did you find us, on a form. Nobody ever goes on that form to actually, check it off and say, oh, this much income came in from Instagram. This much income came in from Facebook. They don't take that step. So what made you do this?
I just think my mind works that way. I'm thinking about it constantly. I'm old enough to remember when I advertised in Yellow Pages. And I did that too. I've been practicing for 28 years. And it was fascinating because I had a full page ad, $60,000 a year in Yellow Pages in Houston. And we asked our patients, where'd you find us? Yellow Pages, Yellow Pages, Yellow Pages. And then one day we said, yes, we know you found us in Yellow Pages, but where did you hear about us? And it takes diligence to drill down. I ask every patient when they walk in, so how'd you hear about me? I really want to know, and I'm constantly, filtering that to find out where. But sometimes, anyway, we said, well, where would you find? Oh, well, my friend told me about you, or I heard you about here. I looked you up for your phone number on Yellow Pages. We dropped that ad immediately, and nothing changed. So your point, Sheila, is well taken. You've got to drill down. It's all in the numbers. It's all in the data, and if you're not getting, and it's hard to know what the return on investment is on some of these marketing areas, but you've got to drill down, otherwise you're wasting time.
Well, along those lines, I wanted to just mention that we have a question from Akash, who's from Hawkins, just along the lines of tracking your metrics. So, Phaedra, can we unmute him? Akash, do you want to ask our panelists your question?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I was wondering, there's lots of different features on all these different platforms now, including the more dynamic stories and then the more static posts that are traditionally there. Are you seeing differential conversion from each of those, and how are you quantifying that? And are there specific types of posts that you see work in each scenario for a story versus a post?
I think it's difficult to track whether it came from stories or if it came from an actual post. I don't know of any way, Tony, I don't know if you know anything, a way to track that, but I think it's just about being present and giving that education and showing your personality so people feel connected to you. And I think the best I can do is on my EMR, I basically ask my front office, I've actually programmed it this way, that unless they tell us how they found us very specifically under categories that I've dictated, they cannot schedule an appointment. So I think that's a very quick way, rather than just asking everybody who comes in, how did you find us? How did you find us? I think it's a really great way that I can just in 2 seconds pull up how much income came in from Instagram from this date to that date. And it will quickly shoot out data to me. And I do that every single month about every single referral source that I have, whether it's Yelp, Real Self, Instagram, Facebook, doctor referral, patient referral, whatever it is. And I can have hard data to look at, and it will guide my choices moving forward.
Sheila, I think we're all going to be DMing you in about 15 minutes to know exactly what EMR you're using and how you do that.
I use Patient Now.
I do too.
Yeah, so it's, you can actually have, you know, little, you can set which fields have to be filled in before your front office staff can actually move forward with scheduling a new patient. And it's kind of cool too, because you can even see, okay, well, this one patient like Joan Smith, she referred 4 people. They spent this much money. Let me send Joan a little thank you facial. Whatever, you know what I mean? It's a really great way of even looking at inter-patient referrals or doctor referrals.
Sure.
So while we're waiting for another question, I want to ask Tony and Sheila just about the content that might be of interest to some of our participants. You know, what's your, you two are obviously very present and successful on social media. Do you have any kind of guiding principles for people who are trying to be successful? What's the secret sauce? You know, some people try to keep it just strictly about business. You know, obviously some people have a blend of, you know, their personal and their professional life. Is it possible to just keep one separate from another, or is it nowadays you have to do both?
Tony, you want to take it?
Yeah, I guess I would say that you really want to vary it. Patients do really want to see before and afters, and even better than before and afters is video, and video of people before and after surgery, and even during surgery, ideally. That being said, you definitely want to intersperse it with some personal stuff, because in the end, they're going to want to feel like they know you. And if they do, then they're more likely to convert and choose you as their surgeon.
I totally agree with that as well. I have 31 other plastic surgeons just in my building. And I'm not going to say that any of us are better trained or more talented than one another. So unless you show your personality and the people feel really connected to you, how are they going to choose you over the guy next door? So I think it's really, really important to show your personality, what you're interested in, so people can relate. And, you know, I agree with Tony, that's when they'll start to convert.
I couldn't agree more. My followers are not in the realm of my 2 esteemed colleagues, but I was doing YouTube videos 7, 8, 9 years ago, and people came from pretty far distances, and they bond with you, you know, and not everyone's going to bond with you, but they're going to virtually bond with you. They're going to say, oh, you know, we all read non-visual communication, non-verbal communication, and that's how you get it across on video. And people automatically, as humans, as adults, say, oh, I trust that person. Oh, I know that person's good. And like a filter, they've already selected you, and that's what you're doing.
And so for each of you, what would you say, how much time do you spend daily, would you estimate, on kind of social media and branding, either through Instagram, Facebook, and do you try to focus on one platform versus another based on the type of patient population you want to grow?
So I guess, I mean, I think I spend more time than most because I really enjoy doing it in a creative process. Now I would say, you know, for those people who are listening, you know, what you really want to do is find the outlet that you enjoy, because in my opinion, I think when you look at return on investment, and I'm sure Sheila would agree with this, is, you know, the people who have grown and whose accounts have grown are not people who hire some company for $5,000 a month to manage their social media and put generic quotes and things up there. It's the people who, like Sheila and I, will take our phones and talk into it, and we'll show things and vary the content up. But it really has to be something that you enjoy doing, because people will appreciate it. Because really, when you look at the amount of hours, let's say, that I spend on social media and other types of content creation, the return on investment isn't honestly that good. But I enjoy doing it, and that's why it makes up for it. So that's, you know, so if you don't like doing certain things, then don't do it. I wouldn't necessarily spend the money hiring somebody to do your social media. You know, if you like one outlet, whether that is necessarily perfect and has the most patients, that's okay, because you can really excel in any of these as long as you love it, and people will, you know, and you're doing it yourself. People will see that.
We have actually one more question from Manish Shah, if you don't mind, because we're getting close to the end. I want to give Manish an opportunity to ask the question. So can we unmute Manish?
Yep, he's good to
Can you hear
go.
me? Do you want me to go ahead and ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so my question was, how does throttling of content in the feeds for Facebook and Instagram affect your actual ability to deliver content? I mean, as busy as surgeons are, there's only so many hours in a day. So my question is, put another way, in other words, when the playing field isn't fair, why use social media at all?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Why isn't the playing field?
So, you know, the greater you are as a content creator, like let's say Tony's talking about how he spends a lot of time because he loves to do it. So he creates a lot more content, has a lot more understanding of how good content works. So he's out there doing his thing.
Mm-hmm.
These social media platforms are recognizing that, well, this is a good content creator. We're just going to push his content to the front, which is great for the consumer. But when you're trying to just run a business and you're trying to attract some of these patients in your local markets, and you're not in a big market like, you know, Beverly Hills or, you know, Dallas, you're in a smaller market somewhere else, you know, at what point is there like not enough return to make social media something you spend a lot of time in versus just dabbling in, and, you know, you put your occasional post up here and there? I realize it's important. I mean, I try to work on it all the time, but I never seem to feel like I'm getting anywhere with it.
I think it's like any other type of marketing. You can't just like put a post up every once in a while and think that it's going to do something and move the needle. I think that it's something that you have to put time into, sort of build a page, build a following. It's very much like any other kind of advertising. I don't know if you've ever tried to work with an advertising company, but they say you have to give us at least 3 to 6 months, because that's how long it takes for them to actually start seeing results. I think it's the same. And I think that's just speaking to what Tony was saying. You have to kind of enjoy it to keep doing it, and, you know, creating and sort of building that following and interacting with people. So it's not just about putting the post up, it's about answering the DMs that come from it. It's about thanking people when they write a nice comment. It's about really engaging with the audience. And I kind of disagree a little bit. I think social media has made it a very even playing field. I think that now, you know, no plastic surgeon could have gotten their name out before being in practice for 10 to 15 years, because that's just how long it used to take to get that referral and word of mouth out. Now, I think if you are a good doctor and you're a good surgeon and you're willing to advocate for yourself and really put yourself out there to connect with people on social media, I think it really has evened out the playing field a bit.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. We're getting on at 8:30, and I want to thank everybody for joining tonight, our participants. Thank you, our author, Dr. Moliver, and our moderators, Dr. Youn and Nazarian, and Phaedra and Kylie, and Dr. Nahai from ASJ for setting this all up. So join us next Tuesday, first Tuesday of every month at 8 p.m. for our next ASJ Zoom Journal Club. Thank you very much.